Mr. Speaker, do you commit to observing regular order in the certification process of the 2024 election, even if Kamala Harris beats Donald Trump?
Well, of course, if we have a free, fair, and safe election, we're going to follow the Constitution. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was Mike Johnson qualifying his intention to follow the Constitution, but only if some vague, made-up qualifications are satisfied first. So, first of all, is it legal to cook up prerequisites for following the Constitution?
Okay, to be clear, Mike Johnson is saying he's not following the Constitution. Okay, there's no qualifications. What he is saying is if Donald Trump wins, he is happy to certify Donald Trump the winner. If Donald Trump loses, he is not going to certify anyone other than Donald Trump the winner, right? Which is not saying he will follow the Constitution in either regard. It is simply saying that Mike Johnson, who was an election denier in 2020, he led the pack of Republicans to oppose certification in 2020 when he was a backbencher. He is now the Speaker of the House. God willing, he will not be the Speaker of the House by this January 6th, but he is no friend of democracy. He is someone who is making himself very, very clear as to where his priorities are.
Can you talk about what it's going to look like if, for example, Democrats win the House in terms of being able to certify an election in early January? Would they be sworn in, and would a new Congress be sworn in, and would they be in charge of certifying the election for the presidential race?
Yeah, so the new Congress is actually sworn in a few days before the presidential votes are tallied. So each chamber will meet on January 3rd to swear in the new members. And so now, there can be vacancies, there can still be some elections that haven't been decided, but they will do that. And in the normal course, that is, again, sort of one of these celebrations of democracy, and then they choose a speaker, although, as we know, last go around, that part didn't go so smooth.
Not quite as perfunctory as we might have thought.
Yeah. They take photos with their kids. The kids are oftentimes on the floor. Usually this is a pretty celebratory thing. We'll be watching to see what happens this time.
Okay, so I do want to dig into the prospect of, let's say, Republicans do retain the majority, for example. When Republicans say that they'll only certify or only follow the Constitution if the election is free and fair, what do those words mean? Because they claim that the last election wasn't free and fair, and we know that it was. So what does it suggest that free and fair means to them?
That Donald Trump wins. That simple. Literally, It means that Donald Trump wins. I mean, Kamala Harris could win each of the swing states by 5 percentage points. There could be no early voting. There could be no voting by mail. Now, those things are not going to happen, but I'm just saying, and they would still say they were not free and fair elections.
Right.
Kamala Harris could win 49 states in a landslide, and they would say they were not free and fair elections. Right. We just have to understand the Republicans don't mean anything they say, literally. What they mean is if Donald Trump wins, they are happy to certify the election. If Donald Trump loses, they will not certify the election. Look in 2020. They refused to certify, more than 130 of them refused to certify one or more states. And none of those states were that close. And by the way, the other thing is, Brian, none of them were outcome determinative. Yeah. Right. So think about it. It wasn't even like when they were refusing to certify a state, that state in and of itself was close, or that state would have made the difference. They just are beholden to this guy, and they're going to do his bidding.
Right. Well, let's carry forward with this thought experiment for a moment. What would happen if Mike Johnson, who would be in the majority in this, again, thought experiment, refuses to carry out his oath and doesn't certify the results?
Look, the good news is that they tried this once before and it failed. And if they try it again, it'll fail again. It'll fail for a variety of reasons. One of which is that Congress, in the meantime, enacted a stronger law called the Electoral Count Reform Act. In 2020, we had the Electoral Count Act. Now we have the Electoral Count Reform Act, precisely to deal with these circumstances. It made several clarifications, including the role of Congress and the thresholds necessary to object. It also made clear that that if states certify their election results by a date certain in December, those results are conclusive, and that Congress doesn't have the authority to reject them. Now, does that mean that you won't still have, a bunch of Republicans claiming that they want to do so? Of course they do. Like, there are a bunch of Republicans that claim every bill that goes before Congress is bad, even the ones proposed by Mike Johnson, which is the reason why he can't govern anything. So they're going to make that noise, but I don't think that should give people too much concern. It should give people concern that we do not have a responsible Republican Party to govern. It should give people concern of what happens if Donald Trump wins and he has a unified Congress. I don't think people should be worried that if Kamala Harris wins the election, she gets certified the winner by the states, that somehow Mike Johnson's going to be able to take a rabbit out of his hat, even if he is somehow still the speaker.
And I know that regardless of what happens in this election, you and your team are going to be making sure that the actual election integrity is defended in the court. So for those watching right now, a small step that we can all take to support the work that Marc and his team are doing is just to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I use it on a daily basis. It is monumentally helpful and easy to understand, even if you don't have a background in law. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Marc, for posterity, did Republicans prove a single instance of fraud that they set out to prove in the aftermath of the 2020 election, including in front of judges who Trump himself appointed?
Not a single one. Not a single claim of fraud was ever proven. Not a single sub-claim of fraud, like even a deduction of votes took place in any case. In other words, it's not just that they didn't prove that there were 100,000 fraudulent votes. Not a single judge even found there was a single fraudulent vote in any of those cases. And as you point out, those cases were heard by Democratic judges. They were heard by Republican judges. They were heard by nonpartisan judges. They were heard by panels of judges. They were heard by justices. They were heard by Trump appointees. They were heard by Obama appointees. Like, there was no circumstance under which any court gave any solace or any comfort to the wild notions of fraud that Donald Trump and his supporters made.
They were heard by the U.S. Supreme Court that is so pro-Trump, it effectively rewrote the Constitution, giving him broad presidential immunity that doesn't exist in the Constitution, and even those people decided that there was no basis for any of these lawsuits. But some people on the right are going to hear your answer and say, well, they didn't rule on the merits. Every case was just about jurisdiction or standing. What's your response to those people?
Yeah, that is simply not true. I get this response all the time. And look, I created Democracy Docket in 2020 for a variety of reasons. One is I wanted to provide good news and information to people so that they could understand what was happening to democracy in court. But a second function of Democracy Docket is it posts all of the case filings. So you don't have to take my word for it when I say something happened in a case or that this is what the Republicans argued. You can actually go on Democracy Docket, click on a case, you can read the briefs filed by both sides, and then you can read the court's decision. And if you do that, if you just go look at the cases on Democracy Docket from November and December of 2020, you can read case after case after case in which the courts considered the arguments, the merit arguments. You can read cases in which Donald Trump's lawyers were allowed to depose witnesses and introduce evidence at trials that there was fraud. And you can read the court's decisions evaluating that evidence, saying, we have heard from this witness, we heard from this witness, and this is what we found. It is not true that all of their cases were dismissed on standing or jurisdictional grounds. A lot of the cases that were dismissed on standing and jurisdictional grounds were simply so far-fetched that the courts had no basis to consider them. If Sidney Powell, who was one of Donald Trump's 3 Dream Team members, and let's see if you can remember the 3.
Was it Rudy Giuliani?
Yep.
And was it, I want to say Jeffrey Clark, but I think
no, Jenna Ellis.
Jenna Ellis. That's right.
Right. It was Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, and she, Sidney Powell showed up in court claiming, that there were mythical sea creatures and dead Venezuelan leaders. Sure, those got dismissed without a lot of evidence because, I don't think a court needed to hear a lot of evidence that, Hugo Chavez didn't rig the election. He was dead.
Yeah.
But there were lots of other cases in which the courts really took it seriously and gave them an opportunity to put their evidence on and make their arguments, and there simply wasn't any evidence.
Well, all of which underscores why it's so important to build up, subscribe to, and support Democracy Docket. So again, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.